Is the world's largest democracy, India, heading towards dictatorship? This question, disconcerting as it may be, has become more relevant in recent years. India's political climate has seen a noticeable shift, with an ever-increasing centralization of power. This trend is quite evident in the current administration's approach, where the central government's influence appears to be expanding, stretching its reach into areas traditionally under state jurisdiction. The controversies are not far behind. The recent years have seen a spike in political arrests, a phenomenon that has raised many eyebrows. Opposition leaders have found themselves behind bars, often on charges that critics argue lack substantial evidence. Take, for instance, the case of Delhi's Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal. His arrest without proven guilt led to public outcry and charges of political vendetta. This incident, among others, has spurred conversations about the erosion of political freedom and the undermining of democratic principles. However, it's not just about the opposition leaders. The common man, too, seems to be caught in the crossfire. With dissent being met with stringent action and the space for dialogue shrinking, citizens are left to wonder about the state of their cherished democratic rights. Looking into the future, some fear that the ruling party, under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, might push the country further towards a more authoritarian regime. The question then arises, is this the direction in which India is headed? The impact of these developments on the common man cannot be overlooked. With the democratic fabric seemingly under strain, the consequences for the average citizen could be far-reaching. So, as we delve deep into the current political climate, we find ourselves grappling with unsettling questions. Are these the growing pains of a maturing democracy, or are they warning signs of a different path? So, we find ourselves asking, is this the hallmark of a democratic nation, or are we witnessing the rise of a dictatorship? As we continue to observe and analyze, let's remember, the answer to this question will shape not just India's future, but also its identity as the world's largest democracy. Let's now delve into the viewpoint that argues India is moving towards a dictatorship. To begin, let's consider the suppression of dissent. In a healthy democracy, dissent is not only permitted, but encouraged. It's a vital component of the democratic process, allowing for a diversity of opinions and perspectives. However, in recent times, there have been disturbing instances of individuals being targeted for expressing views that challenge the establishment. Critics argue that this is a sign of an emerging authoritarian regime where the ruling power seeks to stifle opposition and control the narrative. Next, we have the issue of political arrests. In a just society, the judicial system should be impartial, with the rule of law applied equally to all citizens. Yet there are claims of political leaders from opposition parties being incarcerated without sufficient justification. This has led to concerns that the legal system is being used as a tool to silence political opposition, a tactic often associated with dictatorial regimes. Then there's the threat to freedom of speech. This fundamental right is the bedrock of any democracy, allowing citizens to voice their opinions, engage in meaningful discourse, and hold their leaders accountable. Unfortunately, there have been alarming instances where this right has been curtailed. Reports of journalists being intimidated, censored, or even arrested for their reporting have raised red flags about the state of press freedom in the country. Lastly, consider the concentration of power. In a democratic setup, power is typically dispersed among various branches of government to prevent any one group from gaining too much control. However, critics argue that there has been a trend of centralization of power, which could potentially lead to autocratic rule. These incidents have led many to fear that India is on the path to dictatorship. The suppression of dissent, political arrests, threats to freedom of speech, and concentration of power are all signs that have historically pointed towards authoritarian rule. However, it's important to remember that these are viewpoints, and there are counter-arguments to be considered, which we'll explore in the next scene. But not everyone agrees. There are those who believe that what we're seeing is not a move towards dictatorship. In fact, they argue India's democratic processes are alive and well. Elections are held regularly and at various levels, from the village panchayat to the national parliament. These elections are conducted by an independent body, the Election Commission, which ensures a fair and free voting process. This is a crucial element of a democracy, and it is still very much in place in India. Furthermore, public participation in decision-making is a key indicator of a democratic society. In India, this is evident in the form of public hearings, consultations, and town hall meetings. The Right to Information Act, enacted in 2005, has also empowered citizens to hold the government accountable. Another key characteristic of a democracy is the existence of checks and balances. In India, the judiciary plays a crucial role in this. The courts, including the Supreme Court, have often acted as a check on the executive, striking down laws and decisions that are deemed unconstitutional. They have also upheld the rights of citizens, even in the face of government opposition. The media, too, is an essential part of a democratic society, serving as its fourth pillar. While there are concerns about media freedom in India, it's worth noting that there are numerous media outlets that continue to report critically on the government. This, they argue, is not indicative of a dictatorship, where the media is typically under strict state control. Also, let's not forget India's vibrant civil society. Non-governmental organizations, activists, and ordinary citizens continue to voice their opinions, protest government policies, and fight for their rights. This level of civic engagement is not characteristic of a dictatorship. For these reasons, many argue that India, despite its challenges, remains a democracy. The question then arises, what does this mean for the common man? In any political scenario, the impact on the everyday citizen can never be overstated. Let's first consider a move towards dictatorship. In such a regime, the power is concentrated in the hands of one individual or party. This could lead to a faster decision-making process, which, if used wisely, could result in swift developmental changes. However, the peril lies in the potential for misuse of this power, leading to suppression of dissent, curbing of freedoms, and violation of human rights. The average citizen could find themselves in a state where their voice is stifled and their individual rights are compromised. On the other hand, the maintenance of democracy, while slower in its processes, upholds the rights and freedoms of the individual. It allows for debate, dissent, and a multiplicity of voices to be heard. Democracy, with its system of checks and balances, aims to prevent the concentration of power and the potential for its abuse. The common man, in this scenario, enjoys the freedom to express opinions, to protest, and to contribute to the shaping of policies directly affecting their lives. However, democracy is not without its challenges. It requires active participation from its citizens, constant vigilance to ensure its principles are not violated, and a robust system to hold those in power accountable. The common man, therefore, bears a significant responsibility in a democratic setting. In essence, whether India leans towards a dictatorship or continues to uphold its democratic ideals, it is the common man who stands to gain or lose the most. It is their rights, their freedoms, their daily life that would be most affected. The key lies in understanding the potential implications of each scenario and actively participating in the political discourse, for it is the collective voice of the common man that shapes the future of a nation. Whether India is moving towards a dictatorship or maintaining its democratic status quo, it is the common man who will feel the impact. As we conclude, it's clear that the question of India's political trajectory is a complex one. Throughout this discourse, we've navigated a landscape teeming with differing viewpoints, each echoing unique concerns, hopes, and apprehensions about the country's future. We began by examining the current political climate in India, where tensions are high and the divide between the ruling party and the opposition is stark. We saw how this divide has led to a debate on whether India is inching towards a dictatorship, a debate that remains unresolved due to its multifaceted nature. We then explored the argument for a dictatorship, where proponents believe that a single, strong leader can expedite decision-making and implementation of policies. Critics, however, fear that such a concentration of power could lead to the erosion of democratic values and freedoms. We looked at the counter-argument as well, where critics of the current administration claim that the jailing of opposition leaders and critics without proven guilt is a dangerous sign of an emerging autocracy. They argue that this not only undermines the principles of democracy, but also sets a dangerous precedent for the future. Next, we delved into the potential impact on the common man. We discussed how a shift towards a more authoritarian form of governance could affect the daily lives of ordinary citizens, their freedoms, and their rights. The potential implications range from limited freedom of speech and expression to a reduction in the power of the judiciary. In the end, it's important to remember that these perspectives represent a wide spectrum of beliefs and concerns. The question of whether India is moving towards a dictatorship is not a simple one to answer. It's a question that requires continuous dialogue, scrutiny, and, above all, active participation from all of us. What the future holds for India, only time will tell. But as citizens, it's crucial that we stay informed, engaged, and ready to protect our democratic values.